My Utmost for His Highest, author Oswald Chambers, original printing 1935, this printing 1992. God's total surrender to us. For God so loved the world that He gave. John 3:16. Salvation does not mean merely deliverance from sin or the experience of personal holiness. The salvation which comes from God means being completely delivered from myself and being placed into perfect union with Him. And when I think of my salvation experience, I think of being delivered from sin and gaining personal holiness. But salvation is so much more. It means that the Spirit of God has brought me into intimate contact with the true person of God Himself. And I am caught up into total surrender to God. I become thrilled with something infinitely greater than myself. To say that we are called to preach holiness or sanctification is to miss the point. We are called to proclaim Jesus Christ. See 1 Corinthians 2:2. The fact that He saves from sin and makes us holy is actually part of the effect of His wonderful and total surrender to us. If we are truly surrendered, we will never be aware of our own efforts to remain surrendered. Our entire life will be consumed with the one to whom we surrendered. Beware of talking about surrender if you know nothing about it. In fact, you will never know anything about it until you understand that John 3:16 means that God completely and absolutely gave Himself to us. In our surrender, we must give ourselves to God in the same way He gave Himself to us, totally, unconditionally, and without reservation. The consequences and circumstances resulting from our surrender will never even enter our mind because our life will be totally consumed with Him. Yielding. You are that one's slave whom you obey. Romans 6:16. The first thing I must be willing to admit when I begin to examine what controls and dominates me is that I am the one responsible for having yielded myself to whatever it may be. If I am a slave to myself, I am to blame because somewhere in the past I yielded to myself. Likewise, if I obey God, I do so because at some point in my life I yielded myself to Him. If a child gives in to selfishness, he will find it to be the most enslaving tyranny on earth. There is no power within the human soul itself that is capable of breaking the bondage of the nature created by yielding. For example, yield for 1 second to anything in the nature of lust, and although you may hate yourself for having yielded, you become enslaved to that thing. Remember what lust is. I must have it now, whether it is the lust of the flesh or the lust of the mind. No release or escape from it will ever come from any human power, but only through the power of redemption. You must yield yourself in utter humiliation to the only one who can break the dominating power of your life, namely the Lord Jesus Christ. He has anointed me to proclaim liberty to the captives. Luke 4:18 and Isaiah 61:1. When you yield to something, you will soon realize the tremendous control it has over you, even though you say, "Oh, I can give up that habit whenever I like." You will know you can't. You will find that the habit absolutely dominates you because you're willingly yielded to it. It is easy to sing, "He will break every fetter," while at the same time living a life of obvious slavery to yourself. Excuse me. But yielding to Jesus will break every kind of slavery in a person's life. The discipline of dismay. As they followed, they were afraid. Mark 10:32. At the beginning of our life with Jesus Christ, we were sure we knew all there was to know about following Him. It was a delight to forsake everything else and to throw ourselves before Him in a fearless statement of love. But now we're not quite so sure. Jesus is far ahead of us and is beginning to seem different and unfamiliar. Jesus is going before them, and they were amazed. 10:32. Excuse me. This is the aspect of Jesus that chills even a disciple's hearts to its depths and makes his entire spiritual life gasp for air. The unusual person with his face set like a flint, Isaiah 57, is walking with great determination ahead of me, and he strikes terror right through me. He no longer seems to be my counselor and friend and has a point of view for which I know nothing. All I can do is stand and stare at him in his amazement. At first I was confident that I understood him, but now I'm not so sure. I began to realize that there is a distance between Jesus and me, and I can no longer be intimate with him. And I have no idea where he is going, and the goal has become strangely distant. Jesus Christ had to understand fully every sin and sorrow that human beings could experience, and this is what makes him seem unfamiliar. When we see this aspect of him, we realize we really don't know him. We don't recognize even one characteristic of his life, and we don't know how to begin to follow him. He is far ahead of us, a leader who seems totally unfamiliar, and we have no friendship with him. The discipline of dismay is an essential lesson which a disciple must learn. The danger is that we tend to look back on our times of obedience and our past sacrifices to God in an effort to keep our enthusiasm for him strong. See Isaiah 1:10-11. But when the darkness of dismay comes, endure it until it is over, because out of it will come the ability to follow Jesus truly, which brings inexpressible, wonderful joy.